Hi, friends. Welcome back to Rapture and Chill. I'm Brooke, and this is not a nature podcast. I know, but there are some super weird things happening with animals right now, and I simply can't not talk about it. I promise we're still going to talk about creation stories afterwards, but I have a very important question for you. Have you ever heard about Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos? This is episode 4, Deep Dive Primordial Waters. First of all, watch Narcos on Netflix. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Second, Pablo Escobar lived on a compound in Colombia in the jungle. It was over 7.5 square miles of land, and he had a zoo, which included 4 hippos. After he was killed, the animals were removed from the land over time, but they left the hippos, you guys. And now they've estimated that there are around 200 hippos living in a Colombian jungle and wreaking havoc in the streets. They have an invasive species, guys, and it's literally hippos. The government has no idea what to do with these animals. Sterilizing them didn't work, so Colombia's environmental minister is talking about potentially killing around 80 of them as a last resort. But fear not, sweet baby angels, because the billionaire in India who owns Vantara said, I'll take the hippos. So now I guess they're trying to see if they can legally transport Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos from the jungle in Colombia to a billionaire's nature preserve in India. How is it possible that the same species who's bombing schools in the Middle East is also willing to spend an insane amount of money to move hippos so they won't get euthanized? And for the record, I totally support saving the hippos. I'm just pointing out the duality of it because humans are so confusing. I really want to talk about that blue whale in Germany too, and also the Mexican gray wolves, but I need to not take up too much of this episode talking about nature things. I could spend hours just browsing the internet and finding interesting animal news to read you guys, but I won't. Anyway, let's talk about today's actual topic, primordial waters. As far as we know, the oldest civilization with written history is the ancient Sumerians. This isn't news, right? We all learned this in school, hopefully. Remember hearing about the Fertile Crescent? It's this little swath of land in the Middle East that kind of curves around from the Persian Gulf through the valley between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and it goes all the way down the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea to Palestine. This would have included what we know today as Iraq, but that region previously was referred to as Mesopotamia. By 4100 BC, the Sumerian civilization had expanded from small settlements and villages into actual city-states with the development of the first known irrigation systems. Archaeologists have found evidence of a severe flood in the region that dates to roughly 2900 BC, which is what many scholars and at least one random girl on the internet believe could be the same great flood event discussed in the Sumerian and biblical stories. Around the same time that Mesopotamia was growing, or shortly thereafter, other civilizations began popping up all over the world in areas like Peru, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China. And interestingly enough, each of those regions also experienced devastating floods thousands of years ago. These floods were apocalyptic, and poor Egypt, dude. The Nile River really put them through it. Like, if everything wasn't just right, then it was either drought or flood. And that, to me, just sounds like such a stressful existence. Anyway, my point is, all of the oldest civilizations were flooded at some point, almost like each one hit a point where it had to be reset. What I find even more fascinating is that so many creation stories also depict a water theme. So what's the correlation then between flood resets and water creation stories? Is there one? I don't know. Let's look at a few of these creation by water theories and you can decide for yourself. I want to go back to the Sumerians briefly first because to them, water was the creator, like the original mother. According to Sumerian mythology, in the beginning, there was only water. This wasn't like a disastrous flood reset situation. It was just a vast, infinite ocean of still water. That was the initial void of, I guess, outer space. In their mind, that was water. Space was water. Is outer space just water? Anyway, the Sumerians believed that Namu, the infinite ocean, was the source of heaven and earth. They specifically believed that as the primordial mother, she gave birth to the heaven and earth on her own. And we love an independent woman. The universe formed within her watery womb as a cosmic mountain called Anki, where the sky, An, and the ground, Ki, were fused together. Anki were the first couple, and their offspring, the Anunnaki, were the first generation of gods. Their oldest and most significant child was Enlil, the god of air and wind. He physically pushed his father, the sky, upward, and his mother, the earth, downward. And then that hollow space in between them is the atmosphere where we all exist. The Anunnaki is going to make a really fun episode topic in the future. I definitely want to dive deeper into that. But for today, what's relevant is that the Sumerians had a water themed creation story. And as a quick side note, the Egyptians had a very similar kind of story. The vibe was a little bit different, and there wasn't an actual birth, so to speak, but the concept of the void being water was the same. That shared concept is sometimes called a cosmic egg. So, I guess that answers the old chicken or the egg question, right? It's obviously the egg that came first, so now you can be obnoxious and repeat that useless fact at parties like I will. Now, let's jump forward in time just a little bit. In the 2300s BC, Sargon of Akkad conquered the Sumerian city-states and united them all as one nation. This is where the creation story began to evolve as the Akkadian Empire was built. Sargon gave some of the Sumerian gods new Semitic names, and the Akkadians had started to view water overall as much more aggressive than the peaceful Namu. So creation was no longer a beautiful birth, it was a brutal battle. And according to Akkadian mythology, before creation, there was only water, but it was two entities, not one. Apsu was fresh water, and he represented order and calm. Tiamat was salt water, and she represented chaos and creativity. When the waters mixed together, the first generation of gods was born, and as more generations of gods were born, they got louder and louder to the point that Apsu couldn't sleep. Does this sound familiar? Remember the Mayan hero twin story? So he decided to kill his descendants so that he could finally get some rest, but it backfired because he ended up getting killed by his great grandson, Ea. Yes, all bad, all around. So Tiamat, understandably upset, became a sea monster to seek revenge. And remember the sea serpent from the Hopi twin story. That one apparently started causing problems because someone killed its kids. Very interesting. There was a full-out civil war among the gods. Tiamat ended up getting defeated and killed by Marduk, who was Ea's son, and he used her remains to create the heavens and the earth. Thus, Marduk became the patron god of the city of Babylon. He was like their savior figure. The ancient Mesopotamians had always believed that the gods created humans to work the land for them so that they could rest. But as they entered that Akkadian Babylonian era, the dynamic became very master-slave. And the civilization began to emphasize authority more. That included their king and their king of the gods. Next, we're looking at the ancient Canaanites. Their civilization was at its height around the same time as the Babylonians, but they didn't have river irrigation systems where they lived, so they were dependent on seasonal rain. From everything that I read, it doesn't seem that they have a specific creation story regarding the universe itself. Water and chaos were just always there, which is basically what the Mesopotamians thought too. The Canaanites believed that the first couple was El, the creator of all things, and Asherah, the mother of the gods. These names are mentioned in the Bible too, I believe, but they weren't a couple in the Bible anyway. Their union produced 70 gods, and each of them represented a different nation. That should sound familiar too. Yam, apparently the favorite son, was originally appointed as king of the gods by El, and he was the god of the sea and represented chaos. This is where we get that water theme back. Baal, the god of storms, was younger and apparently a bit of an outsider. He had no crown or palace, and Yam actually ordered the other gods to bring Baal in as a prisoner. Baal fought back, though. He killed Yam and took over his throne. The storm god defeated the sea god and was believed to control the waters. He also had a recurring cycle of fighting Mot, the god of death, and if he lost, the region had a drought. So obviously that wasn't ideal for a civilization dependent on rain. He basically kept the world from drying up or flooding. Side note, the god referred to as Baal is actually named Hadad. Baal isn't a name, it's a title, like Lord or God. So he technically would have been referred to as Baal Hadad. But over time, it got shortened to Baal because he was the supreme god to the Canaanites. He's mentioned in the Bible too, but the context is different, and we're not going into that today. I'm not really going to get into creation in the Abrahamic religions too much because we're pretty familiar with that story for the most part. It's very chill, let there be light. But before the Torah, Bible, and Quran had been written, the ancient Israelites had a different view of creation. It wasn't God just speaking things into existence. This early version is known by scholars as the Kauskampf, which is a German word that literally means struggle against chaos. It wasn't peaceful, it was war. Before the Israelites had settled in the hills of the Levantine region, their earliest poetry describes Yahweh as a god coming out of the southern wilderness. His birth is never explained, he just is. Yahweh defeated a Leviathan, a multi-headed sea serpent, to bring order to the world. And the Leviathan represented the chaos of the seas. So Yahweh had to subdue the waters so that dry land could appear. And that is how they believe the boundaries of the world were created. There are bits and pieces of that story still left in the Bible, but the context of it hasn't really stayed the same. And hey, I'm not saying any single creation story is or isn't true. I mean, I don't remember being there myself, but I believe God created everything. I have no idea what that means. Apparently, no one else does either, since there are so many different versions of the same story. But A, God being a woman and giving birth to the universe is super fun. And B, history isn't heresy. The more we learn, the more similarities we find in all these different cultures across the world. We only learn by asking questions, but you still get to choose what you believe. So, what do you think? Were the floods a rebirth each time? Is destruction by water part of the cycle of creation by water? I think the whole concept of the original existence being just water and chaos is fascinating because floods are basically chaotic waters. It's another dichotomy. Water creates and water destroys, or God creates and God destroys. When we spoke about ancient indigenous prophecies, the theory of the Great Purification was a pole shift. So, like we said, that means the earth would essentially wobble and then flip, which would cause the waters to flood the lands. As humans, our lives are completely dependent on water. Our bodies are mostly made up of water. We need water to drink. We need water for crops, for livestock, for wildlife, for cooking and washing. We can't exist without water. The oldest civilizations realized this and saw water as the foundation of the world's existence. Why can't we? We're moving backwards in terms of conservation efforts. You would think that as human beings in 2026, with access to an infinite amount of information, we would take conservation more seriously. I Googled this, and apparently around 60% of people believe in some sort of creator God. Okay, imagine if 60% of people on Earth actually cared enough to be concerned about wildlife conservation. Obviously, I love that someone wants to save Pablo's hippos, and Timmy the whale in Germany, Godspeed, brother. I hope you bounce back. These rescue efforts are wonderful. I love it. But it's not enough when entire ecosystems are being destroyed. Empathy shouldn't be felt only for people. We need to empathize with all of God's creations, especially the innocent ones who can't save their own homes and are dependent on us to make sure that their habitats remain safe and plentiful. Not only do we have no right to destroy it, but we have a responsibility to preserve it. Nature's important. It's beautiful. It literally represents all of life on this planet. And obviously, I'm not saying that you should literally go chain yourself to a tree, but at least care about it because it matters. Well, that was a spazzy one. How apparent is it that I have raging ADHD? Staying on topic for this one was really hard. I know the subject matter here was kind of different this time, but whatever. There are no rules in a rapture. And speaking of, how's the journey going, guys? Are you hanging in there? This past week seemed to have a common theme as far as the conversations I was having with my friends and family. And I'm curious if you noticed something like that too. It was about control, that whole let go and let God thing. I fully believe I went through an ego death last year, which sucked, but it was totally necessary. And now I can help my friends who are going through something similar. The most important part of the ego death, in my opinion, is letting go and realizing you can't control it all. By being rigid and unwavering in everything, you're just blocking your blessings. Be malleable, relax a little. This white knuckle grip that we have on every aspect of our lives, big and small, is a trauma response, which is totally valid considering the past several decades of chaos on this planet. But the only way to break that cycle is to soften. Loosen your grip on the reins. Believe that good things will happen to you, and they will. Religious texts tell you that. The law of attraction tells you that. Whether it's faith or quantum entanglement, I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, it could all be the same thing. But when you try to control everything instead of just letting God or the universe work things out for you the way that it's supposed to, it's like you're shutting down your receptors. Life is going to happen. We make mistakes. We get hurt. But when you shut down completely to prevent yourself from being negatively impacted, you're inadvertently preventing yourself from being positively impacted as well. So relax, let go and let God go with the flow of the primordial waters. I have no idea what we're going to talk about next episode. I honestly might need to skip next week because of Mother's Day, but if I can manage to get in even a quick little upload for you guys, I will for sure. I appreciate you all so much for showing up every time and listening to me yap. I hope that you're able to take something away from each one of these episodes and that all of the little seeds that we've been planting are starting to finally sprout. Don't forget to weed and water your mind gardens. Go outside, let the sun warm your face, put your feet on the grass, have some quiet time with nature. I'll see you next time, whenever that is. But until then, can you please do me a favor and just rapture and chill? Okay, bye.